Hey guys, it's Cassandra Williams from Educational Innovation 360. Today we're talking about differentiated instruction, especially when we're thinking about how do we infuse AI for professional development. We're really excited. We always know that there's never a one size fits all approach in education, but this time we're talking about personalization and how do we integrate AI into adult learning. One of the things we know AI is changing how we do professional development. So what's actually happening now, I don't want to even say traditional approaches. This is kind of what's happening now in kind of K-12 schools. There's one workshop that fits all. Hopefully all the specials teachers just get in where they're fit in, because typically it's about testing or training, and it usually doesn't meet the needs of all teachers. We know there's usually some type of generic content that they try to prescribe to everybody. It's kind of like one pill that they assume that everybody can take, but it really doesn't work that way. And then there's usually no circle around to see if it was done, it was implemented, or people tried it, unless there's a protocol, like this is something mandatory we must do, right? And then thinking about how do we talk to data or even talk around data, it usually is because we're doing some type of checklist or schools are mandating that this happens, but there's usually no data tied to it, no reason why. And so when we think about how do we differentiate, especially for 2025, we think about how do we create individualized learning pathways? How do we make sure our roles are specific to individual needs that teachers have? How do we have the human approach as well as the AI approach to make sure that there's follow-up and procedures around that with coaching? And then how can data track growth based on baseline support and baseline data? So we're really talking about a true evolving evolution from current traditions that we're seeing now in our schools to what we want to see in the future. And we know there is power in differentiation of learning. Thinking about how do we even differentiate new teachers versus veterans, right? Or teachers versus specialists or leaders, or looking at NWEA data for K versus 1, and looking at map growth, like NWEA data, and looking at classroom dynamics, class analytics, and what that even looks like for 3 through 6. And really understanding that these 3 pillars are where we need to continue to focus on moving forward. And then I want to kind of stress how coaches, of course, make these goals actionable. And so thinking about what are your partnerships, what is the goal setting at your school, and how do teachers or whoever the stakeholder is provided modeling to make sure that that differentiation not only continues, but it cheerleads teachers and builds confidence and relevance to current conditions. All right, so there's so much AI-powered professional development and trends. Here are just some of the ones that I hope that you kind of have already looked into, is like looking at our personalized pathways. What does that mean to kind of accelerate teacher or leadership growth? That's one thing, like I said, we pride ourselves at Educational Innovation 360 is we want to make sure that our leaders and teachers and coaches are saving time, get that just-in-time support. And so really thinking at what are the many modules that's necessary for teachers or coaches or principals to keep growing, reducing their hours of planning time, and do they have the resources necessary for ongoing coaching and deliverable expertise? And so we understand that AI is not replacing teachers. It is amplifying and supporting them, maximizing their time and their impact. So I want to stress, of course, there's collaboration throughout AI, but remember, we do well when we work together. And so understanding the importance of peer learning, through shared exploration of these tools and experiences. What does insight look like? How can teachers provide reflection and build the confidence to explore AI together? We know it doesn't work in isolation. And then what are the communities? When we talk about our communities, right? How are we supporting them with the acceleration of innovation and staying adaptive to what are the trends and what's going on in K-12 schools? In 2025, I kind of see these 3 critical challenges that we are faced. So access, of course, access to equity to curriculum and content. Burnout, not only teachers, sometimes the students are overwhelmed, and principal burnout is real. And what are implementation? There are several barriers to implementation. And of course, we understand about the digital divide, the risk of unequal professional development opportunities. In more affluent schools, they may have more access to AI training, AI support, and urban schools not so much, right? Thinking about, I went to a school the other month, and one of the things they're doing is kind of recycling teacher interests and having teachers do the research on their interests and then present. Now, granted, that works in theory, but if there's no systematic approach to professional development, then it's just great ideas that the teacher's having that's implementing in the school system. So really, one of the things, like I said, we continue to pride ourselves on is reinforcing solutions that we think about AI that address both the human and tech. If you read a lot of my blogs, talk about SAMR, when do we introduce tech, when do we not, right? And how do we plan without tech? And then we utilize our tools to support learning. And then there's the data out there, making sure that we are still doing best practices. We're still doing research driven, and we're still looking on academia and some of our higher ed and some of our key practices in schools as best practices, right? And so when we think about these 5 strategies, of course, data informs PD, data-driven design, professional development, better outputs. We know hands-on exploration helps with time, giving teachers that opportunity to explore and do and practice. And then there's sustainability with coaching cycles, just looking at what's working, how do we continue to morph this, or how do we tweak it to make it better? What is that looking like? We have dove into this lately, is like thinking about micro-credentialing systems and how do we certify teachers for these mini modules that they're taking for professional development. We already give professional growth points, but when we're talking about what things look like in small chunks, micro-credentialing is phenomenal for that. And then last but not least is something I don't hear much about. We talk about social emotional learning and stuff for the students, but I think when we're talking about well-being, we also need to talk about what's the well-being for our teachers, and now granted, these are not things you can kind of do right away to fix it. These are things that we implement that are sustainable systems to build kind of that lasting growth. So think about professional development and the power that AI can have on mini module professional development. We know, of course, it saves time, right? Being able to save time, tools, and planning, especially for planning for teachers. It helps with engagement rate, right? We can put engagement metrics in it and mini timestamp. We can set SMART goals. And then thinking about implementing content. And these are the 3 kind of pillars that I see as kind of proof points that professional development definitely is more effective when you have these things and when you have differentiated instructions as well. And so when we encourage our principal leaders to think about how do we continuously replicate these results in their current context. So I would like to say we're leading the way, because we are. Educational Innovation 360, we are leading the way in transformation, really looking at our model with AI-powered resources, thinking our mini module experiences, our comprehensive support, so everybody receives a coach in their area of support, and then thinking about evidence-based innovation. One of the things we do is kind of bridge that gap between research and practice and implementation. And we are one of those thought leaders for districts who are looking to change and transform their professional development that they have currently at their schools. The future is now. The future is happening. So when we're talking about building future ready teachers or educators, we have to kind of think of what does it look like for personalized pathways? How are we using AI to enhance efficiency, especially in the classroom? And then what are we looking like when it comes to sustained transformation? We have to really think about these personalized growth, AI and efficiencies, and then sustainable ways that we can build our school communities. We can provide professional development that really drives change that people want to see, and that really helps teachers and students access the curriculum. I hope these tips help. If you need to learn more, DM me. Talk to you later. Bye.